see a couple more. No, I'm kidding. So yeah, there's only a few of you, but we made it. For those of you that don't know, this is a pretty important topic, and all of you are almost going to get kind of a one-on-one lesson today. But we are having a job fair on the 17th of September, and so far we've got some fantastic employers that have already committed to come, and they are looking to hire immediately. So if you are looking for a job, which hopefully if you like money and you want a job and want to work, you'll make it. And for those that didn't come today, we're going to have to kind of like double back over some of this information to kind of help them out, but you are going to hear it firsthand, and that's a big deal for you guys. So we do have both a talk today and a panel. We've got most of the people actually from Techlahoma here with us today. I think everybody here is a member of Techlahoma in some way. I think most admins and presidents and vice presidents, ex-presidents, a lot of fantastic information. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess, Luke, you're up first. All right, so take advantage of this. This is like that private lesson.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lucas Watson. I serve on the board for Techlahoma. I'm one of the co-founders here at Starspace 46, and in my day job, I'm an IT recruiter for Robert Half Technology. So I help people find jobs. That is literally my job. What I wanted to talk to you about today, and I know that Jeff has got some great content on job fairs specifically, and Jesse's got some good pointers there too, but I wanted to talk more about strategy and tactics for that first meeting, whether it's at a job fair or your first interview. A lot of this applies to both of those situations. Before I have a candidate go in to talk to an interview, or talk to a client to do an interview, I always give them a nice prep talk. It's 5 or 10 minutes long, and you're going to get kind of the big version of that, the unabridged prep talk today. So the first thing that I'll say is crucial is that you've done some research about the company. Okay? You can't just show up, walk in cold, not know anything about the company that you're going to interview with, and expect to get very far. They have reviewed your resume. They've said that you look good enough on paper that they're interested in talking to you. You should have done your research too, so that you know something about what they do. You should also try to find out who you're interviewing with and know something about them. Now, I'm not saying you should Facebook stalk them. That's creepy. It's weird. You're going to turn people off if you do that. But you should know, look at their LinkedIn profile. See how long they've been with the company. See what their job title is. Find out if somebody you know has maybe worked with them or worked for them. Because the first time you meet a company, you want to make them like you, right? You're not going to get the job that day. You're not going to get a job at a job fair. Almost certainly. Maybe it happens sometimes, but it's very, very unlikely, and you shouldn't count on it. You're not going to get a job in a first interview. But what you are going to do is learn about the company, learn if you want to work there, see if they like you, and possibly advance to the next round, right? Where maybe you've got a shot at getting the job. So you got to make them like you, because people like to work with people that they like. Everybody has a culture at their work. They're fiercely protective of that culture if it's a good one. And if they don't like you, they're not going to let you in. So remember that first and foremost, is at a job fair, at a first round interview, you're not going to get the job there. You're just trying to advance to the next round. So you need to have your expectations and goals kind of aligned with reality there. Tactically, how do you make people like you, right? So the first thing is knowing something about their company, knowing something about the person who's interviewing you, coming prepared to talk about the actual position, so knowing as much as you can about what they're hiring for. It's also even more granular, you know, your nonverbal communication, your posture, your eye contact, a firm handshake, all of these things that seem kind of simple and rote are really, really important. So when you walk in, make sure you greet the person, you shake their hand, and you sit down, you've got good posture, and you keep good eye contact. I mean, that's things that everybody needs to hear right before they walk into an interview, because it's easy to forget. And that's regardless if it's a software developer interview, a network engineer, or you're interviewing to be a sales guy or an accountant, right? All those things matter. Also, smile a lot, okay? Seem like you care. I've had really so many stories of candidates that were technically qualified for a job, but just came off as not very excited about it or a little too disengaged, and they were passed on for candidates that maybe weren't as technically qualified, but really made a connection with the person that was interviewing them. So don't don't downplay the importance of being enthusiastic about the job and enthusiastic about wanting to learn more. Also, technically, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here, at the end of the interview, this reminds me, at the end of the interview, never ask for notes on your own performance and never ask for the job. Okay, because if you ask them, hey, how did I do today, right? You've put them in a really awkward situation. Because if you did really well, you'll know that when they ask you to come back for a second interview. But if you did poorly, then you've just put them in a spot where, one, they've got to lie because they don't want to make you uncomfortable, or two, they're going to give you some feedback you probably don't want to hear right to your face at that time. And most interviewers don't really want to do that. So don't ask for feedback right away. If you get a letter that says, hey, thanks, but no thanks, then you can send a letter back, hey, anything I could have done better next time. That's an appropriate time, but don't do it in person. It's just weird. So when you go into a job fair and interview, you're almost always going to get what I call interview in 3 parts. And those 3 parts are, 1, the section where the interviewer asks you some questions about yourself, about your experience, about your background. 2, the part where they talk about what they're looking for, who they're looking to hire, what kind of skills and experience are important to them. And then 3, the section where they open up the floor for you to ask them a few questions. Now, generally it goes in that order chronologically. Sometimes you get that info dump at the beginning. If you get that, that's great. Pay attention because they're telling you awesome things that you should deliver back to them, right? They're giving you the answers to the test on the test. And so if you get that part early, and even if you get that part late, pay really close attention so that whenever you're answering questions about yourself or giving examples, you can weave back in those things they said they're looking for, the things about yourself that highlight those qualities or skills or experience that they're looking for, right? So put that back in there. And that's not lying, that's not spinning, that's just answering questions and paying attention to context, right? So do that. You will almost always get a question that sounds like, tell me a little bit about yourself, right? And that's going to be one of the first questions. You're going to get that at a job fair. You're going to get that in the first interview. That is not an opening for you to talk about your hobbies and your church and your dog and your family. You want to stay away from that stuff. That's your 30-second to 2-minute long elevator pitch on you, the technologist. You, the person who can add value to their organization. You, the person who's done some cool stuff, wants to do more, and is open to learning, right? So if you don't have that pitch crafted, you should work on that. So you need to have a 30-second to 2-minute long, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, from a professional standpoint, this is what I'd love to do, although I'm open to whatever you might need, right? You're trying to get your first job, be really open. But make sure that you don't fall into that common pitfall of going too personal whenever they ask you to tell them a little about yourself. There's a time for that. It's usually, in the second interview or third interview, as maybe you go to lunch with them before you get the job. Then you can get a little more personal. But in that first contact, you want to show them what value you can add. Always try to be adding value. Think about how you could add value to their organization. Those people stand out. So you get the 3 parts, right? First part, they're going to ask you questions. We've already talked about the second part, out of order. So when they're asking you questions about your career and your experience, you want to try to tell a story as much as you can. And I know that's kind of hard, and maybe you've got to practice it, but it's worthwhile. So if you think about your favorite people in the world, most of them are great storytellers. They're people that can spin a good yarn, that can keep you entertained. You want to listen to what they're saying because they've got something that you want to hear, right? Remember that you're trying to make people like you enough to advance you to the next round. So if you can make your career a story, it's so much more impactful and so much more relatable. I like to tell people to start with where they got bitten by the technology bug, right? So for me, when I was 13, 12, we had a 386 computer, and I had a friend who lived down the street that knew a little bit more about getting around in DOS than I did, and we would mess around, and we would change things, and we would write little batch files to try to launch our games, and we would mess with things, and we'd break it, and then we'd have to get it fixed before my dad got home, right? And that was always really fun for me, is that pressure of trying to get it fixed before my dad got home, and that's when I kind of got bitten by the technology bug. And I'm not a software developer, I'm not a network guy, but I love technology. I build my own PCs. I build my own drones and fly them. I do all sorts of cool little stuff like that, right? So I can trace that through to my first job, and then to my second job and my third job. And an easy way to think of that is to kind of imagine your favorite episodic series, right? Maybe it's Game of Thrones, right? The series season finale is coming up tonight, so let's use that. In Game of Thrones, you've got a season, and that season's got an arc, but each episode also has an arc where things happen, and they all kind of tie together to the season, right? Think of your career as that. Think of your experience in your life in technology as that. The spot where you got bitten by the technology bug, that's where the story starts, and then you get to where you got your first job in technology, where you got your next one, or maybe you did some training, or I got bitten by the bug and then I took freeCodeCamp, and then now I'm here looking for a job. It doesn't have to be a long story, but tell the story of how you got here, right? And if you think about it, in episodes broken up as part of a bigger arc to the point where you are now, you can really craft a nice narrative around why you're here, why you're looking, and how you got there. So whenever someone's asking you about your experience in an interview, try to tell it as a story, because it's going to stick with them a little bit more than somebody that just gives you bullet points off of, hey, I had this job, I did that, right? I did X and Y and Z at job A, B, and C. That's boring. Tell a story. And then finally, when you get to the third part of the interview, they're going to let you ask them some questions part. You need to have some questions to ask. Everybody should have, there's a few like layups, right? You want to give your interviewer like a slow ball down the middle so they can just knock a home run out of the park, right, from sports analogies. Ask them some easy questions. What's great about working for X? What's your favorite thing about being there? What's a challenge about working there? That's the toughest question you want to ask them in a first interview. You can ask some tougher questions later if there's red flags, but what's a challenge about working there is maybe as tough as you want to get on that first time, because you still want to keep moving through. You can ask people about themselves professionally. Everybody likes to talk about themselves, and we're going to go back to the theme of making them like you. If you give somebody a chance to talk about themselves, they're going to appreciate that, and they're going to associate more positive feelings with you. So you can ask them, how long have you been with the company? How did you get here? What do you think is a great thing about working here? What's your personal favorite thing about working for the company? Ask them just little things about themselves. What did you do before you came to work here? You know, what's your background? Don't ask them about, something you saw on their Facebook profile. Again, we talked about that's creepy. Don't do that. Don't ask them about anything that's not business or professional related. But you can ask them about themselves, and I think that's actually a good thing to do if you have the time. Something like, what would a successful person do in the first 30, 60, 90 days in this position is a good question to ask as well, although that might be better suited for a second round interview. Stay pretty general on the first round. But those sorts of questions, you need to have some prepared. And then I'm going to talk about a couple little tactical things that also help people like you while you're interviewing with them. One is smile a lot, okay? You got to smile a lot, because when I smile at you, what happens, Jeff? You smile right back, right? You can't help it. It's hardwired into our brains. And when we smile, we have dopamine and serotonin released from our endocrine system, goes into our brain. Those chemicals make us feel good, right? So if I make you smile by smiling at you, you feel good. You associate that smile and those good feelings with me, and I'm biologically hacking your brain to make you like me by smiling at you a lot. I'm not joking. This works. So smile a lot, like right up to the edge of where it feels like you're hitting on them, right? So don't get to that, stay a couple inches away from that line, but that's how much you want to smile. It feels like a lot. It feels weird. It's not weird. It works. But yeah, so think about that. Ask them questions about themselves. That's mostly it. The best way to close an interview is, hey, thank you, Mr. Manager. I appreciate your time today. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think I could add a lot of value. I look forward to hearing back from you. Right? So that's literally say those words. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Manager. Really appreciate your time today. I think I could add a lot of value to your team. I'm really excited about what you guys have going on here. Look forward to hearing back from you. Right? It lets them know, one, that you're interested, two, that you think you could add value, and three, that you want to know more and you want to move further. Because a lot of times, even if an interview goes really well from your perspective, the interviewer doesn't know if you want the job or not, right? So it's good for you to let them know that you do without asking for it. Again, don't ask for it, don't ask them for feedback, but you can let them know that you're interested and you look forward to hearing back from them. So that's mostly my speech. If you guys have any questions, I think we do them now, do them after. Any questions in the room right now? Yes? So his question was, how many absolutely perfect interviews have you had? I can think of 2 or 3 in 6 years that have gone really, really well, where they knew it was just going to be, that was their person. And how many interviews do I see every week, right? 10, 12, 15. So let's do the math over a year. That's 500, 700 a year. Over 6 years, that's 36, 40, 4,000, right? So 2 out of 4,000 have gone like incredibly well. There's no such thing as a perfect interview. There's no way that you're going to walk in and ace it every time. You're always going to second guess yourself and think you could have done something better. But in reality, if you get a B, you're probably moving to the next round, right? If you do 80%, on that interview, you're probably moving to the next round. So, yeah, very, very seldom does somebody go into a first round interview and walk out with the job. 2 out of 4,000, I would say. Yes, Jesse. Sure.
Don't wear a tie here, do wear a tie here. They're going to act like this here, they're going to act like this here. What are the things that you want to signal in the right context? And that's very open-ended on purpose.
So Jesse's question's about the range of culture. Like, how should you modify your behavior, your dress, the way you present yourself to different organizations and opportunities based on what you know or might think about the way that their employees work or the culture they have at their organization? Is that accurate? Okay. So Oklahoma City runs the gamut, right? Like you've got some places that are really conservative and really kind of buttoned down. I think of some examples. I'm not going to name names, but I'll think of some examples. There's some big banks here in Oklahoma City where it's still gray suits and white shirts and red ties. Like that's what everybody wears. And they're even in a place like that, the technology teams are usually a little more relaxed. Maybe they've just got slacks and a button-up on, or they wear a jacket and no tie, or they wear a tie but no jacket, or something like that. So you've got that end of the very kind of conservative, formal, follow your dad's advice on interviewing, right? Follow the advice from 30, 40 years ago. And then you've got places where they're a startup and they're cool and they want to have the kind of culture that a lot of software developers and a lot of young people want to be a part of. And there it might be kind of weird if you showed up in a tie. So how do you navigate that? What do you do? The best thing. So I'll give you 2 pieces of advice. One is I don't think anyone's ever, in my experience, ever not gotten a job because they looked too nice for an interview, okay? If you show up with a tie to a place where they're wearing shorts, you can always take the tie off in the lobby, So my advice for everyone is to, unless you know for sure, go full out formal. And if you get in there and it looks like, whoa, I'm way overdressed, play it off. Say something about it. Hey, this is how I show up. Or, I'm here, I'm looking like this to show you that I'm serious about this. There's a lot of things you can say if it feels like maybe you're a little out of place. But if you can kind of smooth that one out as you're going through, if it feels like it's weird, then you're probably all right. You've got like a 3 or 4% chance of that being an issue, though. So you should really err on the side of more formal when it comes to attire. Now, that's my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice is try to find somebody that works there and ask them what it's like. Hey, what do people wear? And if you're working with a recruiter, your recruiter should really know hey, they should tell you a lot of things. They should tell you who you're talking to, what you should wear. They should tell you what to expect. They should tell you how to act and behave. They should remind you of things to say and not to say right before you interview. They should give you a speech kind of like the one I gave, like 10 minutes before you go in so that it's all fresh in your mind. But if you're not, if you're doing it on your own, you got to kind of do some of your own legwork there and figure it out. But a general rule of thumb is go ahead and err on the side of formal. I would say there is never a time where it's appropriate to show up for a job interview in anything less than for men, slacks and a button-up t-shirt or a button-up shirt, and for women, whatever the equivalent of that is, like sharp business casual, right? That's like the bare minimum, and you move up from there depending on how conservative the place where you're going is. Does that answer your question?
Very satisfactory answer.
Okay.
I think the most important thing was consider the set of all things. If someone does not care how you dress, then they do not care that you're formal. But if they do care how you dress, then they care that you're formal. So if you were to run this into a computer and have an AI figure out what the answer is, they would have given the exact same answer either, than just simply always be formal.
Yeah, there's a greater than zero chance that not being formal will hurt you, right? I guess there's a greater than zero chance that being too formal would hurt you, but it's infinitesimal compared to the other chance for negative outcomes, right? So.
I've intentionally dressed today to demonstrate what the bottom is.
Yeah, and I
Not go below what I'm wearing.
would never show up to an interview like this. I have to mow the yard later, and it's hot. So, any other questions? Any questions from the stream? Anybody watching us? Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate y'all letting me talk to you. If you have any other questions or you want to ask me something offline, I've got a stack of cards over here. You can send me an email at my Starspace email, and would be happy to answer any questions that you have. So thanks a lot.
Between two ferns? There you go. We need ferns.
Between two three-way crossover speaker systems.
Yes. Can you all hear us? Is this good?
Yeah.
Do I have a...
I think
Oh, we need to get a little closer
I'm
together.
cool with that.
All right.
You smell nice.
Thanks. I try to smell nice all the time.
All right.
Yay.
I think the first thing we should do is we should qualify in what capacity we're up here so someone knows what to even ask us.
Go right ahead. You
Okay.
start it out.
So I come from a very different place that Jeff is. I've given a lot of technical interviews, right? I've been on the side of the person who has been the engineer deciding if someone should be in the organization or not. And so I could probably speak for a couple minutes about that, and I will after he introduces himself. But first, I'm going to pass the mic.
All right. Well, that was Jesse Harlin.
Mhm.
He's also the president of Techlahoma.
Yeah, I'm the president of Techlahoma. I run Thunder Plains. I run OKC.js. I've worked at a number of companies as a technical architect, and of course, everything below that, all the way down to just being a coder. So I've fulfilled many roles over the years. So that's me in a professional nutshell.
Yep. And I'm Jeff Yenzer. I serve on the board here at Starspace 46 and also run my own consulting company, Yenzer Consulting Services. I like to keep it simple. I'm easy to find. But my expertise is in human resources and personnel operations.
Awesome. So there you go. You got the technical dude and the personnel, I guess,
Right.
Resources dude up here. So hopefully between our two perspectives, you'll be able to get any question you need answered. And of course, Lucas is still kind of here in some capacity as well. So we might throw the football at them. I forgot to mention, right now I'm in a position where I feel like I'm perpetually in interview mode myself because I own my own business, which is basically software deliverables and consulting. So I'm meeting a lot of different companies right now, and I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and this has been pretty exciting for me. So I have intentionally dressed at the absolute worst I would ever appear at the most casual company. And I also keep a tie and a jacket in my car, so if I show up to a place that's more formal, learn how to tie a tie if you're a guy, by the way. It's just like very
Yes.
easy. It's very easy to learn. If you can program, you can tie a tie, and then put your coat on, and then you can undo things very easily, but never go below this point. And actually, I switched out my, I'm wearing sneakers, but I'm not wearing dress shoes, but I have those as well, right? So there's a lot of shops where you'll show up and they're wearing shorts and they have visible tattoos, and that's okay. This is still fine. If you look too stuffy, they're going to think that you might be the recruiter for the eventual candidate. But dress doesn't really matter very much to the technical person who would be me speaking to you. I literally do not care. I think the business people care.
Yes.
So you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for me.
And chances are when you are doing those first or second round interviews, you are interviewing rather with the gatekeeper, which would be your business savvy person, your HR person, or however they do their structure. But it's rarely the person that you would actually be working with on the team.
That's exactly right. And so by the time you're talking to me,
Mm-hmm.
you've already gone through all that rigmarole, and I'm trying to answer one question, is can I trust this person with responsibility? That, like, if you want to calibrate anything that you would say or any way that you would act, you can always answer that one question. If the answer, like, moves you towards the answer being yes, I can trust this person with responsibility, then it's not a net loss for me to have you on my team, basically. Right. I don't mind training, I don't mind investing, but what I can't have is a net technical loss. And actually, I give a lot of talks in the area about complexity in the code base and a lot of these ways that it's very easy for one developer to kind of like tie a knot for another developer. So they have to come in and then untie your knot first and then go fix the thing that they were going to do. And so ways that you can not be trusted with responsibility would be like grossly misrepresenting what you know in a way that the people who are more senior than you can immediately detect. Like, I can't trust this person to give it to me straight. Or just simply not being technically capable to handle responsibility would be another one. Another one would be aggressive when you're confronted with not knowing something, so you're not trainable. And these are all things that I feel like are intuitive if you think about it, but they're even more intuitive if you put it through the lens of, can this person be trusted with responsibility? And actually, I still run interviews to figure out who my subcontractors are going to be and stuff like that right now. And at the end of the day, I don't care if you come up with a Slayer shirt. If I can give you, and also there will be a point when you've actually passed the interview, but I'm trying to determine how much responsibility I can give you. But it is still not too late to fail. Like, you've already passed, and then if you like flip out when you don't know something, like, okay, great, so I can't, I don't know when that landmine's going to happen, basically. Everything I'm going to say, if you can kind of put it through that lens, it'll make a lot more sense, I would say. So anything you want to add about that?
I would actually like you to expound just a little bit more on when a person that's being interviewed does not know the answer to the question. What are some ways that you understand what they're saying without them losing any face, but still able to convey that they're teachable?
Okay, so when someone doesn't know something, as silly as it sounds, the easiest thing for them to say is, I don't know the answer to that yet. I do know this, and I do know this, but I don't know that. Maybe I can steer the conversation into something that hits more towards their core competency, and maybe they'll fulfill another role better. So for instance, let's say the recruiter, maybe it's Lucas, I don't know, came up and said, we're asking for a JavaScript position. And let me tell you what, this is actually how I got my first jobs. I went in for a C# interview, and I got a JavaScript job because the industry had not caught up with asking for JavaScript people. They were only asking for C# people, but the technical people who were at these companies knew that JavaScript was necessary. So I showed up, answered all the C# questions, and then I was like, oh, and by the way, I know JavaScript. That's how I got started, over a decade ago. And so then they would say, and then I was the expert in the room about JavaScript. Then the questions were, what do you need? What problems do you have? May I see your code? Oh, okay. Oh, if you did this like this, we could get your code base smaller. And then it became about, I was just solving their problems in the interview. That is like literally the best thing you can do. If you're in a position where you have knowledge that they could actually make use of, especially if they didn't think they needed to use it, but you can demonstrate that you can solve their problem, then the interview has been completely flipped in terms of the, power dynamic. I am not afraid to ask technical people to see their code, personally. You might be, and that is about your comfort zone, but the last job that I had as an architect, after I'd gone through these kind of culture questions and all that kind of stuff, I just said, how are you organizing your CSS, was what I asked. And we looked at it, and we went through and talked about what patterns they were using, and it was pretty immediately obvious that that was one place I could help. And I was like, what are you using for your build pipeline? And so if you are showing up as a technical person, again, the question is can they trust you with responsibility? You've already demonstrated that, like, yes, of course. I'm here to help you solve problems. That's a very, very good way to start. But I think your question was more of, how should someone act when they don't know the answer?
Correct. Well, what are some best practices? Because you will get hit with curveballs, even at a job fair, where they're just trying to weed out some of the people that are BSing them.
at every technical interview we ran, we intentionally would try to hit the point where they did not know something, and we would ask them to see how they would react. And it was not we would even tell them right up front, be like, we're going to ask you things you may not know the answer, just giving you a heads up. And that is because if you take any four senior developers and put them in the room and have 3 of them interview the 4th one, you will hit a point where you have hit the crest of their knowledge and they don't know anymore. So imagine that you were at the university and a bunch of specialists came together. They don't expect every single person to know the stuff that every other specialist knows. Right. That's theoretically absurd, right? So the probing questions are usually about trying to determine what your specialty is. And this is assuming that you're already very good and you're already very qualified. And you have a lot of stuff on your resume, and you getting the job is not the question. The weird thing would be if someone in one specialty pretended to know something in another specialty, right? And so what you don't want to do is get mad if you don't know something. You would just say, I don't know that. I think, so-and-so knows it. That's not my specialty. That's not what I've been working towards, right? I've been studying this instead. Another thing is, so be honest, don't lie, don't blitz. We called it blitzing, whenever people would just kind of start using words. And don't set yourself up for, I'll tell you, the quickest way someone failed an interview was, and I'm not naming names, I'm not naming situations or anything like that, but they said, I like insert subject matter here. I really like insert subject matter here. And they mentioned this subject matter because it is an advanced topic, which in this case, I'll just say it was design patterns in code, right? And so they said, I have this really important book written by these really important authors on my nightstand. And so I think what the expectation was on the other end was I would just say, oh, okay, you know about that, no more questions. Well, the thing is you're interviewing with people that this is their core competency. It's not like any other situation you've been in. These are the people who have already been doing it for decades. So of course I was like, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Me as the interviewer, I was excited that someone shared this interest in this core competency. So I said, can you tell me about it? And then the answer was, well, actually I've never read it. So don't feign knowledge about something, because you might be talking to the person that wrote that library.
Yeah.
You don't know. And if you don't know, that's even a worse sign, right?
I think Lucas had a point to that, yeah.
I want to add something too, and I would love to get your take on this, Jesse.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to sneak in the middle here.
No, come right on in.
So one of the things that I often tell my candidates to do whenever they get hit with a question that they don't know the answer to in an interview is what I call the adjacency principle, right?
Yes.
The thing that you hear the most is, oh, I don't know that, but I'm a fast learner, right? Everybody in the world says they're a fast learner. Don't say that. It's like the biggest cliche in an interview.
Uh-huh.
So instead, say, I've never solved problem X before, but I've solved problem Y that does the same, that has the same solution or the same type of problem, but with a different technology. Or I've solved problem Z that's not the same sort of technology solution, but it's a similar process, right? Mm-hmm. And that shows that one, you don't just give up when you don't know something. You're able to think creatively and adapt and use your previous experience to solve a new problem, right? You can see that problems are sometimes similar in the way that they're lined out, and you can apply a previous existing framework to that new problem to solve it, even if you've never done that thing before. And so saying, hey, I've never done that, but I've done this and it's related to that, and this is how I would apply that thing to your problem, my experience to your problem, to add value and get it done sooner, is way more powerful than saying, I've never done that, but I'm a fast learner, I'll figure it out, right? So
yeah, being a fast learner is not really terribly. We'll know if you're a fast learner or not.
Would you, as a technical recruiter, appreciate somebody that answered a question like that? No, I don't know that, but here's what I've done that's similar.
Yeah, I think I said that a little bit earlier, that basically just say, I don't know that, but I do know this.
Yeah.
The easiest way to prelude that answer is, the closest I've come to solving a problem like that is, and then start describing the problem that you solved. Yeah. I saw this, real world example of what you're describing that I've seen in an interview was the person interviewing was trying to see how someone would handle a durability layer. And I don't want to get too technical here in this description, but essentially if you're doing a really large enterprise system, you don't just write directly to the database, right? You have these things that sit in front of your clusters and things that are they're service buses, and they're like the inbox on your desk, right? So it doesn't just go straight to your filing cabinet, right? Well, this person hadn't worked in enterprise systems, but they had made a drawing app where they needed to have a buffer with all the commands. Because if you've ever dealt with a drawing app, you're firing a whole bunch of events, and you've got to collect them and kind of make sense of them before you actually process them, right? So you can see as an audience that these are similar problems. They're essentially like, don't put the glass right underneath the faucet, like put a thing that kind of handles back pressure in between the glass and the faucet, right? Don't drink straight from the fire hose. Put it in a thing and then drink from that thing, right? So they basically, they had not done this specific thing, but they were able to describe the principles of back pressure. They were able to describe what a buffer was. They were able to describe what a cue was. And ultimately, they did get the job. So the answer was, well, the closest I've come to that was this thing I did on this drawing app. And then they described it in the best technical detail they could. And every single engineer in the room that has written a lot of systems was like, okay, they get the basic principle. We could just transfer that knowledge over to what we're doing here. We can use this person, right? So I think this is exactly what you're describing. So, but what would have been bad if they would have just started making stuff up. just kind of using words they had read and using them wrong would be like, I don't know, like we can,
Buzzwords.
yeah,
Aren't you
just
wonderful?
Every single person who's interviewing has a heavy interest in technology, and they have a reason for being here, and they've been working at something. You're always leveling up at something. No one can know everything, and I think that most technical interviewers are forgiving enough to know that. The question is at the end of the day, can we trust you with responsibility? And that responsibility is the stuff that makes the company money. So, yeah.
A lot of my points really kind of echo what Lucas was saying about just your general demeanor when you walk into a job fair. Be cognizant of the fact that any job fair recruiter, any person that is sitting at one of those tables, could potentially be seeing 100 to 300 people in that day. They're tired, most of them. It has just become a sea of faces and names and resumes, and they're just churning in, churning out, and honestly, be cognizant of that and help them through the communication. Talk to them. Be dynamic. Be something that they haven't seen before. Don't worry about making an impression, because you need to. That's the absolute biggest tip that I could ever do, is make some sort of an impression. In the same way that Lucas made on the tie when you walk in. If the tie's not there, man, take that tie off and let them see you do it. Like, let them make it on something that is memorable, because then you become the tie person, the tie guy. And trust me, it will move forward in them remembering who you were against a sea of other faces.
I was the tie guy once.
Yeah?
Yeah, and then the very next day they had it was like Halloween, so they were like, our office is going to dress up, but like no one did it. But like I was like my second day there, so I like had this very convincing pirate costume, and then I was the tie guy and then the pirate guy. So I guess it was like believed I have like a deep wardrobe, which is not necessarily the case at all, but it was not exactly a negative thing to be associated with right away. Also, you're right.
Yes, something to show and tell is absolutely imperative, because it's just one more facet in which you can set yourself apart from all of the other people that just walk up.
Yeah, and I would say at this point, you're not really necessarily talking to engineers and technical folks at this point.
Absolutely.
So the things that get me super stoked may not be the same things that get other people super stoked. I want to hear about how you made your event loop faster in your video game, but I don't know if person number one necessarily is. They're more concerned with the business problem and if you might be a good match. And if they think you might be a good match, they're going to have the engineers like lint you, if you know what a linter is in code. Like they're going to make sure that like, can this person actually do what they say they do? Can it actually be transferred and stuff like that?
And at a job fair, a lot of the times they are looking for culture fit.
Yeah.
They're just, they know what their company's like, and they want to see that the person that's standing across from them or sitting across from them would be a good culture fit. Do you fit well into this team? Do you fit well? Will you stick out like a sore thumb and be someone that turns over in a month and a half, or will you be someone that will integrate well into the team itself?
Yeah, I would actually, just to that point, and this, again, I'm speaking for someone who's been working at these places, and everyone I guess I've interviewed has already passed that around for me.
Right, yeah, that's where it gets to
but,
you. I'm on the first round side of things a lot of the time.
This might be counterintuitive advice, but I would actually say, if you're very serious about your craft and you've taken the time to sort of like get good, for lack of a better term, and maybe you're like a dev designer, you're someone who you do design, you do JavaScript, you know, you've got to position that is actually really valuable and can add value to a lot of companies.
Yep.
Maybe you just go ahead and keep that green mohawk because that's who you are, and the right place is going to want that, and the wrong places will not want that.
Very true.
The more that you have to conform to a place, at the end of the day, both parties are aware that if you have to conform a whole lot, you may not actually be happy there. Now, if you have to do it out of survival, obviously that's not the advice. But I'm saying, let's say you've hit a point in your career where, survival's not the concern. You're trying to find the best fit, and you're trying to advance your career, which you will. You will hit a point where you've got a job, and then really the way to get ahead is you get other jobs, realistically. I would not recommend staying with one company for 12 years. I would recommend 3 years at one company is a pretty long run for a lot of companies, depending on the institution. At the government, that's not a long run. No. But at a startup, that's like, wow, you guys survived 3 years. That's really awesome. Good job. One of my subcontractors has he's into body modding. So obviously my company doesn't mind the green mohawk,
Right.
but he needed to find a place that was a good cultural fit, basically.
Find your fit.
for him.
Yep. Find your fit.
To some degree, it is okay to be yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And that understand that you're also, to some degree, interviewing the company.
Mm-hmm.
You're finding out who they are and what their values are. Maybe you don't feel ethically aligned with working at an ad tech company that tricks people into clicking the green button all day. Like, don't do it. Would you be willing to take a different pay to go work at something that you believe in very strongly? The good news about technology is literally everyone needs it. Like, everyone has to have this stuff. Both political parties have to have websites, right? And obviously the same people are not going to be at both places. Religious and non-religious institutions need websites. Adult websites need websites. There are engineers working there, and they're thinking about first normal form of things I'm not really allowed to say on this stage. So just kind of understand that we are actually very lucky, I feel like, in our profession, because no matter who you are or what you like, there is someone on this planet that needs you as a technologist. Like, you're the belle of the ball, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And so just be cognizant that being yourself and being honest and, that actually does count for a lot. And keep in mind, I was telling you that as an engineer, I'm saying, can I trust you with responsibility? Personal honesty is a really big component to that.
Yeah.
And all these engineers at all these places, no matter what this place is, in my personal opinion, are actually asking that same fundamental question. Is if you're going to work for, let's just say there's more than one kind of institution that needs good video streaming platforms, right? Some of them are work appropriate, others are faith-based, some are just like for corporate, and the kind of people at these places are very different, but they're all going to ask the person they're interviewing is, can I trust you if I break off this piece of work and give it to you? Can I trust that it'll get done?
Yeah.
And I don't have to babysit it and things like that. So I'm actually recommending that you be yourself and that you do what Lucas Watson said to do, which was research the company, find out who you're going to be talking to, decide if you would even want to be there. I feel like early in my career, I did conform more out of survivability, and then as I was kind of moving up, that's certainly true, but that also means that there's not one magic bullet for every single place that you're going to go.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
I would also say to finding and doing that research, the nice thing about a job fair is you tend to know exactly what companies are being represented ahead of time.
Yeah.
And my biggest tip at a job fair is don't waste your time and don't waste their time. If it's a company that you have researched and you know that you're not going to be a fit there, just because they have a table, just because they're nice, just because they smile, does not mean that you have to sit down and talk to them if you know that you're not going to want to work there. Just don't waste your time. The larger job fairs you go to, you might only have 2 hours, and you have to make the most of those 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the biggest tip is use your time wisely because they're trying to do the same thing. What questions do we have?
Yeah.
So I've actually never been to a job fair before.
Mhm.
So you bring your resume, several copies obviously.
Yes.
Dress nice. What would you recommend for female to make their impression? But I mean, like, they just wear slacks and soft jackets. I don't have a cool guy.
Fair enough, fair enough. To your question, you were saying that this is the first time you've been to a job fair, and you, of course, were going to bring copies of your resume, which paramount, make sure that you have plenty of those. And then you also wanted to know, as a woman, what different ways could you stand out? And to not sound stereotypical or sexist, if you show up and you know your stuff, you already have one leg ahead, because many hiring companies are looking to try to promote workplace equality and trying to create environments in which they are culturally and gender-based, widely accepting. So honestly, walking in and knowing what you're talking about is going to be a great boon. It's going to be something that right out of the gate, you're probably going to be remembered just because you knew what you were talking about. You looked sharp. You weren't awkward. Just make that good impression and talk to that person like they're just a normal person, because you are walking in not as a girl coder, but as a coder. You're walking in as not as a girl programmer. You're walking in as a programmer.
Yeah, I'll also say that places where you don't wear suits, places that are more casual,
Yeah.
there is still an expectation that you look groomed and clean, and you like yourself, and you take care of yourself, and like you know, honestly, this is not just for job interviews, but like, well, full disclosure, I actually, a long time ago, when I was very young, used to sell synthesizers at a major retail chain for musical instruments. We had a dress code, and it wasn't a suit, but we needed to look clean and groomed. We needed to know the part. Having tattoos was good, because that's how those folks dressed, right? But the same rules of kind of grooming and taking care of yourself, and you also find that if you, and I'm not a fashionista by any means, but like, you know, too many pieces of ornamentation are probably bad, but not enough are probably good. Like if you have many shiny objects, I'm thinking as a guy here, right? Like I have, of course, yeah, but look.
I am a self-employed consultant.
Yeah, but to be fair, right, if you also had a green mohawk, and you also had a nose ring, and you also had, you kind of overdid it, it would come off as ostentatious, but you also look clean and groomed, and your beard is trimmed, and so even in an informal context, you look fine. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you can wear a suit and like look slovenly. It's possible, right? Like even though you did the thing, you performed the ritual. I guess the more important thing is people are looking for visual cues if they can trust you with responsibility. So one of the things that you're trusting with responsibility is your own appearance. So.
Yeah.
Is it
Oh.
time?
Well, all right.
Sorry.
All
I
right.
had no idea. We were just going until he told us to stop, man.
Well, I think that we're both very easy to find. I can pass out cards, and also you can just always email consultyenzer@outlook.com. Any questions that you might have, I can always answer them. Just pop them toward me, pop me in the Slack. It's always at Yenzer, and I'll answer anything you have. So thank you.
Awesome.